Welcome to this session on Federated Data Governance. I'm really excited to talk to you about federation. What does it mean? How is it different than classical data governance? And since we're not sitting at the data mesh theater, what I would like to do is give a little bit of information, just very briefly what data mesh means, what does federation means. Central question that always comes up, how much should you federate? And why federation can actually give people in the governance space what I call a golden opportunity to reinvent or reshape that bad image that governance has, right? This is the elephant in the room. People don't want to talk about it. It's a sad truth, right? And then what I want to talk about next is once you've gotten your data mesh journey started, your data governance program on, hopefully, what you want to do next is make sure that the ball keeps rolling and the momentum keeps going. And in mesh terms, to keep the momentum going, we're talking about creating data products. And I'll tell you shortly why those first few data products are crucial. And I'll share with you some of the things that worked for me in picking those first data products correctly. So let's jump right into it. And this will be my attempt to explain data mesh very briefly. Let's see how that goes. So data mesh is about trying to tackle data at scale, and it does that through decentralization. It does that by shifting the responsibility left to the business domains, to the people who know the data best, so they can call the best shots. They know the information there, they have the context. What it also does is it introduces this new abstract layer. If you think about it, nothing is out there to protect the data. And Jean-Marc says this brilliantly. Data has no agency. And that means anyone can come along at any point in time, transform the data, and you have absolutely no idea what happened, right? And so what data mesh does, it introduces this new unit, a data product, and you should only be able to access that data through the data product. And that data product encapsulates the standards, the controls, and everything that you need to protect your data. That is data mesh briefly. The four principles upon which data mesh are anchored on is domain ownership. We talked a little bit about this, right? You want to push the responsibility and the ownership of the data to the left, to the domains, to the people who know it best. And the second thing is treating data as a product. And that means taking the product thinking and applying it to your data. That means data is no longer a byproduct, but as you go about doing your business, data is produced by design. You look at the different use cases that you have in your company and the people using that data as your customers. And once you do that mind shift, what do, right? We start trying to manage the data to improve the customer's experience. And so there's this whole life cycle management that comes into play. You continuously look at that data product. What are the customers doing with it? How are they using it? What is their experience? And you're constantly improving it, even up to the point where you see that data product is not useful anymore, so let's retire it. The third principle has to do about empowerment. So I just mentioned we're pushing that responsibility that used to reside maybe with IT, maybe with a central engineering group, right? And we're pushing that responsibility to the business. So we want to make sure that it is that simple. Otherwise, it's an overhead. They'll just raise their arms and say, not doing it. Why would I? So we need to make sure that they're empowered, they have the technology, they have the tooling to be able to create these data products, share them, and manage them as to our wishes. The fourth principle is Federated Data Governance, and this is kind of the area that I've been working on over the past 5 years. So I'm currently the director of data governance at PRIMA, a motor insurance company, and we started that transformation a year ago. Prior to that, I also established and led the data governance group at HelloFresh, and also within a data mesh setup, so also federation. So what does federation mean? Now, if you think about it, we're talking about decentralization, right? And if you talk about decentralization, and the idea is that the business domain should now, or at some point, start creating these data products autonomously. How do you make sure that these data products that are created are interconnected, are interoperable, can be reused? Because this is actually the end goal, right? This is what we want to drive through data mesh, these data products, that we can get value out of that. And if each domain can create these data products to their own will, up to their own standards, then they're going to be isolated. And by definition, a data product should not be siloed. It should be easy to connect to, not have these friction points. And this is where data governance comes in. It acts as a layer of standardization across the board, so the domain can operate autonomously, but still adhering to some foundational standards that are needed to ensure the interoperability and the connectivity. And so when people ask me, what is federated data governance, I say, think of it as an equalizer, as a counterbalance for the decentralization that is inherent to data mesh. So one of the questions I get asked a lot, how much should you federate, right? Because we're talking about moving from this concept in classical data governance where you had a central committee, you had representatives of the business domain, hopefully there, and everything was coming up from this central committee. They were pushing the standards, they were doing the heavy lifting. Yet now we're saying the domains get that responsibility. They are the ones doing the heavy lifting. So how do you balance that? And Scott Hurleman and Serena Basket has the perfect analogy for that. I always hijack it and use it. And they say, think of it as a slider. On one end you have centralization, the other end decentralization. And the reason why you think of it as a slider is that there's no silver bullet answer here. It is always going to be different. Not only from one company to the other, but within the same company, from one domain to the other. And the reason for that is every domain will have a different maturity level. Every domain will have a different capability composition. And so you always have to look at the domain very closely, understand what are their literacy gaps, what are their capability gaps, how much can they actually, at the time being, take on and shoulder in terms of these responsibilities. And you will have some domains that are very mature, and they can take on much more responsibility, and in that situation, you federate more. Data governance team takes a step back, and they hand that over, and they trust that team, and you act more as a guidance. Other domains, they're not there yet. And so what you would do from a governance perspective, you do hand-holding, a lot of hand-holding, and you help them in doing what needs to be done. In parallel, you empower them until they reach a point in time where they can do it on their own. And so it's a slider, and it keeps on moving. Right? When we talk about federation, and this comes a lot when I'm speaking with people who've been in governance for a long time, there's always, conversation is always plagued with inhibition, because people have fear that it's about losing control or about handing over control fully. But what we need to do is have a mind shift, because it's not about losing control. It is about empowerment. You're empowering the business domains, the experts on that data, to take the shots that are perfect for their data, for their domain. But also it's empowering to you. As a governance person, you get to focus on what you do best. And that is creating these guardrails, these templates, these blueprints. Creating a data literacy program to empower people, to bridge that literacy gap, to foster a data culture, and to act as an advisor and guidance. This is what we do best. And so it's kind of a win-win situation, right? It's not about loss of control, it is about empowerment. What federation also presents, in my opinion, is a golden opportunity to take over that narrative, that stigma, that governance unfortunately suffer from. A lot of people, a lot of companies, when you come in and say, I am a governance person, they get goosebumps, and not in a good way. They've been traumatized by past experiences. Data governance is usually seen as the police, very bureaucratic, very heavy, and overhead, and just standing in the way. And that doesn't work. If you want to manage your data, if you want to govern your data, you need people on your side, and you need people to be collaborative and cooperative with you. And so by shifting from that classical governance, where you have this central team sitting in a committee, pushing out these standards, which in a lot of cases is very decoupled and divorced from the business and from the people doing the actual work. And doing this federation and empowering people, that narrative changes, or it can change if you do it right. So let's start talking about some of the things that you can do to leverage that federation and make governance work for you, and maybe repaint that bad image. One of the things that I've been experiencing lately, because I'm hiring for my team, and it hurts a lot. But one of the questions I ask in the interview is, okay, you're going now to a business domain, and you need their buy-in. Tell me what you will tell them. What does data governance do? What will you do? And how will you collaborate with that domain? In a lot of cases, I get that textbook answer from Dama. And that is, oh, we do guiding principles, we have policies and standards, so you know what? We're going to be looking at data quality. We'll write a data quality policy. We'll come to you. There's going to be a set of responsibilities, and this is the goal, and this is what we're going to be doing. Pushback. First of all of this will run past them, right? And they're going to be hearing these keywords: policies, standards, responsibilities. It's not going to work. And so skip or ditch that toolbox talk. No one wants to hear about it. They care about the what. The business cares about what you will do to help them. How are you going to mitigate the pain points and the suffering that they're having every day when dealing with data? And so start speaking about the business value. How are you helping them? And if you want to talk about, the framework, and you're very passionate about, there's a lot of governance people, and we like to talk about that stuff. It's our toolbox. So, save that chat to the, when you meet up in a conference like this, and you can talk about it. When you're talking to the business, change your language. Speak the language of the business. The other thing that fits tightly to that is, remember we're going to the domains and we're giving them this new responsibility, right? And so we have an ask for them, and it's not a small ask, it's a big ask, right? Take ownership of your data and full control of it. And so don't start that conversation from a checklist of, these are your responsibilities. This is what you're accountable for. If you don't do this and that, that will happen. Again, it's not going to work. Start from what you will do to empower them. Are you going to be bridging that literacy gap that they have? Maybe you're going to help make the team more cross-functional, or getting more funding so they have extra capabilities within that team to handle that new responsibility. Yeah. Maybe you will do hand-holding, right? Go in, help them with these first use cases, and get them going, right? So a lot of things that you can do. Start that conversation from the empowerment. The next part is, then you can come and make it clear what it means actually to be responsible. That is also very important, because if the people don't know what is coming to them, of course they're going to be afraid. And no one wants to be surprised, right? So start from the empowerment, and then you can move on to the conversation around, okay, what does it actually mean? But don't go at it again as a checklist of 1, 2, 3, these are responsibilities, and this is how it's going to be, right? Now, this is a pitch that it's controversial, I'll give you that, because it's not 100% correct. However, if you do feel the need that you need to use it, you can. And it's a psychological trick, right? If you go to a business domain and tell them, scrap everything out, everything we've been doing was rubbish, we need data products, and we're starting from zero. Hard, especially if there's been people there who have been, doing their best to work on the data challenges, right? And you'll find a lot of people in business domains who've been trying that because of the bottleneck that was happening with centralized data management approach. And so if you're in that situation, maybe it's easier to say, we're not starting from zero. We're not actually, right? There is data that is useful. There is data today that is used across multiple use cases, and it's already bringing business value. It's just haven't been productized yet. Yet being obviously a huge understatement, right? That's a lot of work to productize data. Now, when it comes to data mesh and what we're trying to do, there's a lot of new words, right? What does it mean to productize data? What is a data product? And perhaps nowadays, even more than before, there's more confusion. Because everyone's interested about data mesh. They're going online, they're reading articles, they're hearing podcasts, YouTube videos, you name it. And because no one knows how to do it yet, there is not this well-trodden path. There's many opinions outside. And so there's a lot of confusion about what a data product should be, how it looks like, how the data strategy should look like. And so you'll have a lot of opinions. And you need somehow to kind of align people. One way to do it is through a data literacy program, right? But it always depends on how influential that person who have a very strong opinion about what should be done and how. So sometimes you might need to have these one-on-one conversations. But you can use data literacy for that. Another important one for data literacy is to bridge the literacy gaps that are in the domains. Remember, you're pushing out new responsibilities, maybe a new feature from the self-serve data platform, a new standard from the governance side. So you need to make sure you come ahead of time and bridge that literacy gap so they can come at it from a place of comfort. They know what they're going to be doing through a literacy program. Another thing that is very important, often get asked, you're working in the governance space, why do you care about data culture? Why should that be on your agenda? And if someone else is doing that, that's good. But if not, I've always taken it upon myself to start that and to foster that. And the reason is, and that is often overlooked, and the people before me here from Bumble, they talked about it again as well, is that it allows the scalability. It acts as an extended arm to governance. And especially in a federated setup, you're trying to move away from having the central committee from which the source of truth and all knowledge disseminate from. But rather, you want to cultivate that there is knowledge sharing, that the domains talk about what has worked, what has not worked. And this is one of the outcomes of having a data culture in place. And it's not an easy feat. There's not one single strategy that you can do to cultivate that. A lot of things, right? A lot of strategies through a data literacy, building communities. Maybe you have an internal podcast where you talk to the different people who are working on the ground and they share their success stories, right? So a lot of different tactics out there to kind of foster that and get it going. So now we've talked about what data mesh is, federated data governance, and hopefully you have these things going, you have a data literacy, data culture is on its way. What can you do to keep that momentum going? And like I said, in data mesh, we're talking then about data products. That is the end goal, and this is where you see value. And it's actually very strategic, that first data product, those first success stories. The reason for that is getting buy-in, even if you've done a fantastic job at it, there will be people in your company who are still skeptical. And there will be people who are on the fence. They're kind of like watching and seeing what's happening, how's it going to turn out. And so you need that first success story to hopefully bring the people who are on the fence to your side, and you have that majority. You'll probably never be able to eliminate everyone who's against it, right, or do not believe in it. And so you need those first success stories. And so what I want to share today is some of the things that has worked to me in 2 data mesh transformations, and things that I tried out and didn't work, and what are the lessons learned. How do you go about picking those first data products? And the first thing is, and I've seen that happening a lot, and I think it's a psychological thing. We have a new data solution. Everyone is excited. Why not try this new use case that we've been thinking about, new meet new? That's fine, right? You can build that data product as a success story. That's good. But maybe it's more efficient to actually look at a data use case that is already in use, that has already pain points attached to it. Because guess what's going to happen? You're going to build that data product, success story, very similar to the first scenario. But you've mitigated pain points, hopefully, right? Pain points of consumers that are using that data product. And guess what? Those consumers are going to be happy. And they're going to be raising their hands and saying, I'm next. Come and help me do my data product. So 2 birds, 1 stone. The second thing that helps, you always need to show the business value, right? Especially early on in those days, you want to show, okay, what is the progress? You always need to tie it up to business value. And it's something that is very difficult. It's a challenge how to do that. A lot of people have different strategies on how to monetize that or show the business value. And what I've seen to be easier, at least to me, is to start downstream and look at these data products that are very close to the business, very close to the decision making. So I can tie up the value in business terms. And then what I do is I trace all the way back up upstream and look at these data, operational data, for instance, or the data at that beginning of the journey and work on these. And then you will see the impact going through, and you can tie up that business value. From that point on, you can have two strategies. You can even have a very focused approach where you say, okay, this is my use case, I'm going to do it end to end. It's a nice story, very successful, very impactful. Or you can say, I want to include as many stakeholders, and so I'm going to take a more holistic approach, and I'm going to do that same thing across different use cases. So you get different people on board. Different strategies, pros and cons for each, right? The third thing, now these are not in order, and you always have to see where the priorities should be. And this is one of those things that I've got my hands burned on. The team that you partner up with on that first pilot is extremely important. You need a team that is motivated, because motivated teams are able to absorb new concepts, which in this situation, we're pushing a lot of new concepts, right? And on the other hand, it's not going to be an easy journey. It's going to be an uphill journey, those first few data products, right? And so things are not going to go as smoothly. And so you need a team that is ready for that, that has this growth mentality, that will think outside of the box and help you, and not raise their hand in defeat and say, told you so, it's not going to work. They're crucial. Get a team who's on board with you. And then it snowballs, right? Other people will see the success. They'll want to be part of that success. The last thing, and again, this hurt badly, because the very first data product I had to do had sensitive data. That was the only way I was allowed to get that buy-in. And I said it before, right? Building those first data products, it's hard, it's complicated. And so if you can, try and avoid adding that extra layer of complexity that comes with handling sensitive data. You know, if you can, push it 3 to 4 minutes. 3 to 4 data products. And so as I come towards the end of the talk, the last thing that I want to say, we talked about these 4 principles. One of the things that I see is that people often just concentrate on those first 2 principles, and I get it. It's easy to get the buy-in for it, but please try and go with 4 principles. It's the only way that you can actually reach that end goal on that promise. Thank you all for your attention. If you have any questions, I'm around. Feel free to reach out to me. It was lovely hearing you.